You know her from TV's Bosom Buddies, Norman Lear's The Powers That Be, The Practice, and of course, 2.5 Men. You might recognize her from her film work in Legally Blonde, Romancing the Stone, or The Day Reagan Was Shot. Or perhaps her current theater piece on the late governor of Texas, Ann Richards. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with Emmy Award-winning actor Holland Taylor. Do you find it harder to create a character or to do somebody who was in real life?
Let's see, I did Nancy Reagan in The Day Reagan Was Shot for CBS, which was a very good movie of the week about that amazing day when he took a bullet and was in the hospital and came very close to dying, which the public never knew. It was a wonderful script, but it was a slightly subversive script and poked fun at the hysteria that happened in government, and if you remember General Haig and I'm in charge here and all kinds of things. And however, between the making of it and the airing of it came 9/11. Right. And so suddenly the public was not interested in seeing something subversive. But about playing an historical character, when they offered me Nancy Reagan, I thought, I can't do that. Because I'm not particularly sympathetic to a lot of what we know about Nancy Reagan, and I don't really understand her point of view about this, that, and the other thing that I've read. And, so, but then the guy said, well, no, just read the script. It's been somewhat rewritten. So I read it and I realized, wait a minute, this is just about one day. And on that day, what Nancy Reagan was the best wife on the planet. Because whatever else you may say or feel about Nancy Reagan, she was and is. I mean, she was a great wife and loved that man, and it was a great love affair. And here her guy was in grave difficulty. She knew his responsibility to the nation, which is why she allowed pictures to be taken of him propped up in bed, trying to look like he was all right when he was dying. And I thought, okay, I can play that narrow part of her. And so I took that job. And but in that case, you see, in television, or if you're playing a supporting role, you don't have any time to do any research. you know, it's like you're shooting Thursday. So as far as voice is concerned, dialect, things like that, that's right out the window. The only people in movies and television stuff who have a chance to do that kind of work are the stars of the piece who have lead-in time and know they're going to be playing it. So now with Ann Richards, although I'm not a genius at dialect, I have been working quite hard on that Central Texas, that twang, that Waco sound, that unique sound that she had. I have been working on that. I've had time to do it, but I've had that time compromised by the fact that I wrote the play, and I had to research it, and I had to travel a great deal to research it. So playing an historical character in the case of Ann Richards has actually been wonderful because I've had absolute open sesame. I mean, all of her principal inner circle staff and friends, who are often one and the same, have just swung the doors wide for me.
But
why,
as
I
an
don't
actor,
know.
When you're doing something like that, I think that a challenge that would face you is it impersonation? Is it caricature? Is it your own creation? And where is the balance in all of that?
But I have tried very hard to strike a balance. I haven't wanted to sanitize her. In fact, Jane Hickey, her sort of consigliere, said, now, we don't want you to sanitize her. I said, be sure. That is not going to happen. And yet I do feel not sentimental, because that's a cheaper kind of feeling. I have an enormous amount of feeling about Ann Richards, positive feeling about Ann Richards. I love her. I admire her. I miss her. But at the same time, but as is very typical with someone you know who might be ornery, it's their very orneriness that's part of why you love them. Well, she is just impossible, you know, and you say it with a smile. In fact, a number of staffers that I talked to, not her closest circle, who of course Ann didn't treat, badly, but she could be pretty rough on, particularly if somebody did something wrong. I mean, they would hide, they would run and dash. They heard she was coming down the hall because they didn't want to get laid out. You know. And yet, when they tell me the story, there'd be tears in their eyes as they were remembering how much they loved her. Yeah. You know, so that you have that combination. So I'm trying to portray her very accurately. But she was many different personalities depending on what she was coping with at the moment, as are you and me. Yeah. That's what we are. And so I can say I know a lot about her. In fact, millions of people knew her better than I, but Mary Beth Rogers, her chief of staff, said everybody knew their own Anne. And she said, you have a pretty good knowledge of a wide range of Anne. She said, probably better than anybody, because I know a little bit about everything, every aspect of her life.
When you're doing a fictional character, in the case of 2.5 Men, and you've had the run you've had with that, do you start to create that kind of an understanding of that character too?
It has kind of a life of its own. It's a funny thing. Well, in the case of 2.5 Men, it depends on what kind of show you're in. 2.5 Men is very much the creation of the writers. It's not an actor's show. The actors really are there to fulfill exactly what the writers have already imagined. They're very specific about what they want, including, dare I say it, line readings. They're waiting to hear you say what they heard when they were in the room writing it. They don't want you to bring a whole lot of your own stuff with it. And sometimes I've brought some stuff, a reaction or some little gag, not a line, but and it's funny and they laugh at it, but they cut it because they didn't plan for it. And so it's a writer's show. And so then that's very different. Then you really are like a really high-class puppet. I mean, but it's a job. It's a job that requires skill. But you're giving them what they want. Now, on something like Powers That Be that I did for Norman Lear, that character started to take off, and Norman just said, "Go, baby, go."
Now, how similar was that character to Nancy Reagan?
Very interesting, because people said, "Well, you're just playing Nancy Reagan, aren't you?" And I said, No, I'm playing Marie Antoinette, because Nancy Reagan knew that they didn't have cake.
Yeah.
Marie Antoinette didn't know that. It's like, let them eat cake. She was just blithe and blah, just living her own life and had her own world and so forth and so on, and didn't know what the reality of the world was. Nancy Reagan is very well aware of the reality of the world.
Yeah.
But she may still want them to eat cake.
Take me all the way back.
Yeah,
the bug for
all
acting.
the way back.
Where did that come from?
It came from the same place the desire to play Ann Richards came from. It just popped in. I mean, I've asked my parents. We didn't get a television set, thank God, until I was probably about 12 or something. And then I would see it at a friend's, and I would see some show like, I think the Jackie Gleason show I saw at a friend's house. And so then the next morning at breakfast, I enacted everything I saw on the show, which was kind of a big event to have seen this show. And I remember my mother saying something like, "Gosh, she really did those things. That was good." And so I don't get the idea in my head. I just don't know beyond that how it happened. By the time I got into high school, I wanted to be in all the plays, and at some point I started taking Theater magazine, which was then and still is a wonderful magazine, and it just took over. Do
you have any idea what it was that appealed to you about creating these other people?
I don't know that it was as sophisticated as creating other people at that point. In latter years, actually quite recently, in my 60s, I realized that I was essentially an only child because my sisters were significantly older and they were away at school. So by the time I was 5, they were away. My mother was very busy. My father was being a lawyer also. My mother was a painter. She was in the studio painting. And I was left to my own devices. Now, I love to read, and I love to wander around, and I was just alone a lot. And I really have truly thought that one of the reasons why I like being in plays is that somebody's watching me while I play. I really think that's part of it. I get to play and have fun and do something, but I'm being watched.
Is that thrill still there today?
To play?
Yeah.
And acting
is it still
a thrill.
the same thing?
Acting is a thrill. Yeah. Yes, acting is exciting for me. it's magic happens. It really is magic. It's such an elusive thing. Where do you put your finger on when it begins? You're not them, but you sort of are them in your imagination, and then you behave in a way that you don't really behave, but it feels natural, and it's a very messy kind of art, craft, whatever. It's messy. It's not like you make this table, and there's the table. And so, I remember I was at a play called Cocktail Hour, and Nancy Marchand was playing my mother, and we were sitting together on the couch, and we were both a little squiffed, and she says in the play, and she says something that sort of vaguely puts me off. So I sort of lurch up out of the couch and drift over to sit in another chair. And so here is the backstage area, and my world, my dressing room and Nancy's and our cars and our life. Here is a wing, and there's the stage manager. You can just dimly see him in the shadows at the stage manager's desk where he runs everything. And back here is a wing where the stagehand is about to pull the curtain. And out there is the audience. So I get out of the couch to go over to my father's chair, and I have my world, the audience, the machinery of the theater, and I go across the stage. And every single night for 300, 400, 500 performances, every single night, at that moment as I'd be making that traverse, I would think, oh, I love acting. And I always had this little poof of feeling. It's just a wonderful world to be in, mysterious.
When you're doing all of that, are you thinking about it? Does it get to a point, especially when you've done, as you say, 500 performances in a show?
Or you think about a lot of things.
It becomes a natural reaction of you as the person on the stage, or are you constantly aware of back there and the guy there and the audience?
Nothing is constant. You're in, out. You're in, out. You're like a flickering needle. You're fully engaged in the thing. Like if you're having an intense conversation, you're very fully engaged in the task of acting that scene. But then at a moment like that, you're human, and your mind can think about. I remember when I did Kindertransport, which is a very brutally difficult play about a woman who had been as a child, a German child who was as a tot, 4-year-old, brought over to England with all those children, Kindertransport, gotten out of Nazi Germany and brought up in England. She was brought up as an Englishwoman, and she just, erased her past, and she was a very proper Englishwoman. And then she was, besieged with memories of, and newsreel, the modern reality of what Germany was. And it was a very, very painful play to do. And I remember one part of it, they had grainy footage of the liberation of one of the camps, and you just see these open graves, and you see the bulldozers pushing these broken bodies, and I'd have to watch this thing, and it was a very rigorous play to be in. And I swear that there were occasions when I would think, I'm going to get a drink after the show tonight. So your mind is going to judge. If you are thinking only about the play that you're in, with your mind never touching on anything personal, and you're I would say mentally, questionably, not totally hinged.
Right.
Because it just doesn't make sense. But the beauty of it is, that's like thinking like a guy doing a painting can't put his brushes down and go out and do. There are breaks. And also, you aren't another person. You are in this mysterious game like children play, Now, if I go here, I'm the Indian, and if you're over there, that means you're the Cowboys. The Cowboys are there, the Indians are here. This is the wonderful thing about the theater, is what you say is what it is, and you want to keep the rules consistent. If the rules are consistent, then the audience perceives the rules, and they go, oh, okay, I got it. Okay, go ahead. They're into it.
When you were in New York, you got hooked up with Stella Adler.
I did. At a late time late for a student. It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was younger, when I first came to New York, I wanted to study with her. And I went to her school, and the registrar was very grand and acted like, I don't think that you're going to be any sort of candidate for Miss Adler. And just scared me off. And then 15, 18 years later, a character actor named Louis Turenne, a very educated guy, said, I've never met anybody who should be more Stella Adler student than you are. So I, by then, worked a great deal, and I became a student at that age. And as a result, I was already a seasoned professional. Mm-hmm. And she would say things, and I would go like, that's the greatest thing I ever heard in my life. And the kids, the 20-year-olds sitting around me were just like, because they didn't realize the significance of her instruction because they were not practiced. And I was practiced. So for me, it was just like pennies dropping one after another. And I actually quit a soap opera and didn't do other work because she was then 79, and I wanted to study as much as I could with her for the next year or two.
And different from method acting, the other side of the coin. In some
well,
ways.
These words are, used interchangeably. When you say method, people think of Brando and people think of the Actors Studio, and that right away. I mean, Brando did hang around the Actors Studio, but that was mostly to pick up girls. He was not a student of Strasberg. He was a student of Stella Adler's.
Right.
And the whole argument about the method, theoretically Stanislavski, this whole thing about sense memory and thinking about events of your life and stuff like that, Stanislavski actually abandoned all that. And Stella was upset by the version of method acting she was being taught, where you're thinking of yourself and where you're thinking about your sense memory and you're bringing it all into you. And she felt that certainly for the great texts that she was working on, the great classic texts, you can't, if you're playing the Queen, if you're playing Elizabeth I of England and you're thinking about your grandmother in Hoboken, you're insane. Yeah, she wanted you to be within the imaginative circumstances of the piece that you were in, and she had the justifications and actions that you would play, and a very, very great understanding of what human behavior is and how to find ways to call it out in yourself. The behavior, the doingness, what you do, how you act, not what you are feeling. She said, actors feeling emotion is the cheapest commodity on earth. She said, you all want to get up on stage, you're like monkeys. She said, being on stage is not for you to be comfortable and cozy and having your own little feelings.
Yeah.
So I responded to this teaching, and it is opposite, actually, of what is typically thought of as method, which is that you are working from a point of view of your own feelings and what you are feeling and creating feelings. And she would maintain that you can't create feelings. You are not a machine. You can't do something the same way you did it that time when your puppy died and feel the same exact thing in the same way. You don't function like that.
But then take it to the next point with me then.
Yeah.
Is everything in the script then? When you get a script, is everything you need to know what the written word is?
No, not at all. You need to research and think about many things, depending on the nature of the script. Any script that has any historical relevance, you have to research. You have to understand the mores and values of the time, what the things in the script meant in that world, in that society, what the values were, where your character was in that society, what was your station, what was appropriate behavior. You have to do a tremendous amount of thinking. And also, your character talks a great deal, usually, because humans do, about the past. You have to think about that past in a creative and vivid way, not just a practical way. Oh, he was born in Chicago in 1922. That's not enough. You have to evoke it in a more rich way so that you have stuff in you, which then the action of the play draws out of you in the performance.
Okay.
It comes up, it bubbles up. You must put it in. Leave it alone. Act, do, engage. I'm trying to communicate with you now. That's an action. I don't have to be thinking about my grandmother to do it, or anything. I don't have to be feeling anything to do it. In fact, the act of doing it is making me feel something. I'm not feeling something so that it'll make me do it.
Okay.
I'm doing something.
We have all of this study, all of this talent, and then comes Bosom Buddies.
Yes.
And I think to some people be like, why would somebody who has all this training go do a sitcom?
Well, if you ever saw the beanbag chair scene, you would understand exactly why, and I suggest you look it up on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Somebody just put that on there. I mean, that's something that I just came up with because it was wonderful. First of all, the principles that I just outlined to you apply absolutely to Bosom Buddies. absolutely to Bosom Buddies. It's just that the end result is simple crayon strokes as opposed to an oil painting. It's the only difference. Tom Hanks, one of the great actors who ever lived, and the only reason why people don't realize that he is among the greats, and you watch, well, we won't be around to see it, but, several decades from now, he will be thought of as one of the great actors who ever lived on this planet. And the only reason why people don't necessarily grasp that degree right now is because he is so accessible. And he's more like every man. Mm-hmm. He is not every man. He is accessible to every man.
Yeah.
This man has such multitudes in him. He's so huge. And yet he's a regular guy.
Did you recognize all that when you first met him? Did you know there was something special there?
Oh, I knew it was something special. In fact, I remember calling up my mother, literally like the second day of work, saying, this kid. And she fell so in love with him that when she came out to visit, it was just classic. She's very tall and very elegant, and she sort of was tilting she just couldn't believe, she just loved this boy so much. And and she said, well, I would like to, very elegant lady. I would like to have a picture, So he sent her this 8x10 picture that said, I love you madly. And it was on her wall till she died.
Really?
Yeah. He was clearly very special. And he had a great histrionic gift, which is to say, if you say, now you're out in the snow in a windstorm, I mean, he would right away, his body could do it,
Yeah.
And he was also dear, very, very dear person.
Going and doing the work in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
the movies and the sitcoms,
Mm-hmm.
away from the theater,
Mm-hmm.
hard for you?
Yeah, it was. And I think that it's, tragedy is too strong a word, but it is the great misfortune of the American actor that there's 3,000 miles between the two aspects of his industry.
Yeah.
Of course, the English are wonderful actors, and one reason why they're wonderful is that they do it much more than we do. And you only get good at something if you do it. And Stella felt I should go to Hollywood because at the time when I was in New York, they wanted names to play even the supporting roles. The theater was changing. And the roles that I used to have in the theater, they're suddenly going to people who had done television shows. She said, go out there, see what happens. And so that was the end of theater, or theater as I knew it, because I couldn't do both. Well, kids in London are doing wonderful masterpiece theater things and being in plays at night and having it all, which is why they're so good. And Americans are deprived of that proximity. And it is a misfortune. And yes, I miss the theater very much. It's my natural habitat.
I read somewhere after 2.5 Men, theater is where you're going to concentrate.
It is. It is. I'm moving back to New York. I mean, I have a place in New York now, but I've come in on hiatuses and on breaks. And I see theater. I go to the theater every night when I'm in New York. I mean, I think the year before I started this research in earnest, I saw about 75 plays in 1 year, and that's being based in L.A.
Wow.
So, no, I have a very nice, modest, small but pretty house in L.A. And when 2.5 Men does wind down, I will flip and have my last apartment, I think, in New York. And I will sell that home in L.A. and I'll get some little sublet or something. You have to have a place in L.A. because you do work there occasionally. But yeah, I'm flipping back because I'm a little older now. I mean, it's a life that requires a lot of stamina, but I do like the life of the theater. I like the life.
Yeah. You say you're a little older now. For a long time in your career, you were playing a little older.
I know.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I think it actually was actually an impediment in my early theater career. I was very, very frustrated. I went for a long time getting this close to roles I'm talking a decade. Yeah. And it was because I was always up for things that I was chronologically too young for. And they would say that. I remember for a play, Hal Prince was directing, not a musical. I don't remember what play it was, but I read for it several times, and I was insane with excitement because Hal Prince is like the deal. And he personally told me, because he obviously felt some affection for me, he said, we can't give you this part because you're just too young for it. You're right for it. But when we see you with your husband, you will seem so young. And I think that I was just right for older parts, and now I'm definitely old enough for them.
Last question before I go. Is it wrong for us to assume from the body of work we've seen of you, or the characters we associate with you, that you are like those characters?
I'm very not like those characters. I'm very not like those characters.
Why do they work so well on you?
Maybe because I want to be like that, in the sense that I would love to just cut a swath, and I would love to not be afraid of what people thought of me, and I'd love to not have fears, and I'd love to just do whatever the hell I want. And, wouldn't we all?
Oh, yeah. And
I think in my life, I'm fairly modest. I think I'm a nice person. It'd be easier not to be a nice person, because I don't mean nice. That's such a weak word. But, I mean, I notice people. I'm aware of them. So they can't just go barreling through, because there's people, and also they say witty things. These characters say really fabulous things that I'm probably not clever enough to think up to say, but I unspool them.
I was going to say, but you're more than clever enough to deliver them, and deliver them brilliantly.
Well, thank you.
We are out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank
a
you.
Pleasure.
Well, thank you. I've loved it. What a good interviewer you are.
Holland Taylor.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of InnerVIEWS, please visit HoustonPBS.org.